Good morning to the sign that this is. Ooh, Catherine, will excuse my bags under my eyes. They're super designer. I'm exhausted. But we have a few signs to get through today. I want to make sure everything is up before the 12/12 portal, so that's important. We're going to jump right on in. You obviously know the sign before I do. I've got these pieces of paper here. We're going to go ahead and pick the last one. Let's see. Who is... Oh my god. It's so hilarious because I was literally like, okay, I was woken up. Obviously, yesterday, some really big things for Aquarius. Neptune goes direct. It's a 14-year cycle, okay? A 14-year cycle of learning, but also kind of a once-in-a-lifetime year cycle that is also completing in terms of things that our soul and our spiritual matter have been looping on for quite literally lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And I think it's so wonderful that Spirit woke me up and that I had to connect with the Aquarius Collective first, because so much of what my direct feelings really are going to be able to be exercised through like the expression of this, but also through an in-depth analysis. I think it can actually like really support you. So some of the off-the-top downloads that I was really dealing with yesterday, as it pertains to Aquarius, and I think it actually is my Aquarian nature that like this cycle is deeply affecting because it has to do with 11th house aspects of life, and really importantly on the associations that can come with Aquarius. I think there's something really nuanced about our energy signature in general. I think it goes without saying that when you have a humanitarian archetype, it is going to be very much like the whale that is gonna, like, when it's time to eat, it's just ingesting so much more than maybe like what biogenetic like organisms, whatever matter, do actually like provide nutrients to the whale. It's like taking all of that in, and it's kind of always going to rely on the system of the whale to like process microplastics, trash, pollution, toxic water, like all of that stuff is like gonna go on the body, because you as an Aquarius, I just feel like you take in, it's like it's this feeling of everyone is programmed to see humanity in you, to be able to empathize with your experience, to be able to connect with who you are. And yet the journey for many of us when it comes to like developing interpersonal relationships is this archetype of like, how do I keep myself though from just like befriending the whole class? Like, how do I, because in the reality, which I think you're coming to understand, especially through the last 14-year cycle, is like, though you could be of service, of use, or even empathize or compassionate towards pretty much any human experience, not every human experience is for you to have. So I do feel like, this is huge. You, for the last 14 years, specifically for me, like I woke up having the exact same experience where it's like, I'm balancing the tightrope of like, what is my path to surface versus like, how do I keep my life force in check? Because I think overcommitting to like being of service, being of use, again, like you see in the world, it's like a hard knock world. There's so few humanitarian efforts out that really like support people and can unify the cause. So I guess because your leadership is always so need-based, it's always like, well, no one's doing the Aquarius thing and unifying the collective cause or even identifying the collective. And so a lot of times you would just go into a path of service without really actually like measuring the impacts that it's going to have on your life or stability. It's kind of like what I did maybe 6 or so years ago with social media, when I stopped like participating on social media as like interacting with other humans, right? When I went like archive mode, which is very recent, but before that, like the real gist of it is like, I'm not actually engaging the media by making relationship dynamics anymore. Like that's not something I'm interested in. It's because it wasn't healthy for me. At the end of the day, again, because some aspects of media just kind of open you up to like this energetic field. And for me, the bite's always going to be like one big bite. It's going to be always like eating the entire cake. It's going to be taking in, the entirety of the situation. And then I'm not going to actually have like the filtration process is also something that I think Aquarius at this time, you're like feeling like, oh, dude, I don't even have the time, space, or energy because of the way that the paradigm is accelerating to also even be the filter anymore. Like I can't really take in unnecessary people, places, things, information, if in the end it's actually just going to require my emotional labor to completely like separate out the situation. So all of these things are being held in your awareness, because we're definitely learning that it's like, I think for a lot of us, you probably really resonate with like always being on the pole of like feeling the need to embody humanitarianism, like in general. And yet, I think the most depleting part of the last 14-year cycle for you, Aquarius, was actually the ways in which your life force was taken from you. I mean, you can look at how I spent all year this year, I'm really coming into a hard knot clarity in terms of my journey, in terms of specifically, this is what your overview is for December, the storms that come on your journey. And I think this is just a beautiful mastery of being able to commit to a process, continuing to be fixed, but also continuing to allow yourself to just stand in the storm. Like, I think one of the things I really broke through yesterday just by hitting sort of rock bottom with the same relational dynamic. And I'll just use myself as an example, Aquarius. So for me, the last 14-year journey was stemmed from and was actually created from the nucleus of like an absent parent figure. So, you know, we always talk about how, specifically in women, when you have an absent father figure, like there's like underfathering, right? You have not been fathered as a child. One of the worst things about my delicate, nuanced relationship with who my dad is as an individual, the karmic ways in which he created me, and then also the ways that that's like gonna crash and converge in the now. I would definitely say it's all of those things happening that make my rapport with my father what they are. However, when you're unpacking, you know, the metaphysical implications of like any relational dynamic, it's really like so foundational and important for you to understand the pattern that comes with it. Because just like I talked to you guys about like being on a path and how like you're not picking people, you're picking the path that you're walking. Well, the same kind of goes for the path that opens up after interacting with certain types of dynamics. So one of the things that I feel like Neptune was really giving me, more so Ten of Swords-y type of clarity, so it didn't really feel great last night, was through the ways in which, you know, I continually have attracted a type of partner, and it has to do with it's like a special, this is why I made the Children of America tour. It's like a special kind of hell to come from a human being, right? Meaning genetically, like our codes are the same. So your people like your parents, people like your family members, there's this level of desire that a lot of us punish ourselves because a lot of us have like very toxic family dynamics, people who like are not well in themselves, right? And yet the catch-22 of being human is being DNA matter, like your desires are tuning to that. So like in a lot of dynamics, it can be desiring a partnership that just like is not healthy. And a lot of us feel the self-punishment because it's like these people, places, or things that are deeply connected to me at a cellular level are not really serving the more so soul trajectory of like what I am as like a full thing, because we're not just DNA matter, we're not just genetic like coding, we're also like metaphysical information as well that is very separate. So like you have ancestors on a lot of different echelons. Like we could be talking about the ancestors that you inherit from like the earth lineage of humans that you come from. You could also talk the spiritual ancestry that you've had, the bodies that you've possessed in different lifetimes, like things like that. So when we're talking about these connections and what they do, one of the things that my father's role as absent did for me, specifically, which you see me document very well here, this was quite literally, like my archive was quite literally the documentation of having to design masculine for me, like having to remake and reprogram the divine masculine to me so that I can actually function as a human, because the data was just never input. And again, this is where I kind of try to get people who follow my studio to understand there's spirituality, there's spiritual guidance, but then there's like what actually like legitimately, if you're talking about crystalline Christ consciousness, like what actually like is expected of you, like if you're actually someone who follows, if you say like your Lord and Savior is Jesus Christ, the idea behind that is the respecting of the equality, the unequivocal equality. So it's like, you know, so many people claim a Christian faith, a Catholic, some echelon of Christianity in and of itself, and say that is what they really practice, which is all fraudulent. Because to actually embody Christ consciousness, to actually embody crystalline consciousness, would actually mean that in these day-to-days when everything throws you in a tizzy, when you continue to seek judgment, when you continue to create these fires, create these moments, when you feel like your humanness and your nature in and of itself is not something that you can supersede, meaning like, I have to get them back for that, I have to say something about that, I have to bring that up. You are the least in the image of what the Jesus Christ frequency would even be. And so a lot of that is coalescing at this time. There's a lot of those turnovers in terms of like, that morality is loose and vapid. It doesn't actually stand behind your actual embodiment. And so that's a huge thing right now that you're navigating, and that Neptune is also bringing to the forefront. Now, at the same time, when I'm talking about the issues that my father did, it's like a lot of the issues that I was dealing with were this concept of like partnerships and dynamics, especially in terms of masculine principles, that I have no containment. So there's like this inability for me to make long-term trajectories or long-term mapping of my own capacity, right? I think I was talking a lot about with my personal family last night about capacity, but my own capacity being really affected in certain aspects because I've never been able to have the reinforcement of my self-identity, which is a paternal thing, right? The role that a father would play is to reinforce your actual sense of self, your first house, your identity, who you actually are. And so with so much parental wounding and so many parents that currently actively exist that did nothing in terms of like what God would have required them to parent, because a lot of people right now, again, part of the collapse that's happening is like reconciling with like, yeah, many of you, even when it came to parents, you took the matrix. You didn't take a godly, divine route to parenting. So many of you, when you're being rectified with this judgment day that we're collectively having at the end of the year, of the snake year, right? When we're having this big review, like again, like I said, the second coming is here. That's where we're at. Like the world can't get any more inefficient and unsustainable than it currently is. So we're in the judgment process of it all. Many of you get asked by your creator, or many of you witness people at this time getting asked by their creator to acknowledge the spiritual aspect of their actions. Many people at this time, at the same time, Aquarius, have been driving you crazy because they keep talking about the third dimension and how much they're a slave to it. They built their lives, their parenting, their relationships with others based on a fake system, right? So even the standard to which certain parents think like good parenting versus bad parenting, right? Like even the standard to which people think they've met certain goals had to do with a made-up system that at some point just a bunch of humans came together based on whatever their morality was at that time, their values at that time were, to say this is what success is, this is what success is not. The only issue that an Aquarius is going to say to you is God determines what is actually successful for your life, and the only measure of success is how well are you actually doing what I sent you here to do. So many people can come down here, bust a nut in somebody, have a child, start a family, and they want to sit here and derive all this value. I talked about this with Pisces, right? Like you're not going to be able to like derive any sense of like actual value from things that are actually not aligned with a divine blueprint. So again, that's the coalescing at this time. So again, back to this way that these frameworks in terms of interpersonal dynamics actually affect the path in which you're able to carve. So for me, yesterday, Neptune was really burgeoning the regard to my own experience that has to do with how, this constant attraction of, for me, Aquarius, and this is likely very similar for you, the constant attraction of partnerships that are, there's a deep desire, there's a deep connection to like, I want this to be here, I want this to create here. And one of the things that I was here to define even in my own evolution was like, desire is actually like, there's still like a level of cognitive dissonance in terms of like, when we say like, oh, I really like someone, like that is actually like is not separate from embodiment. It's not separate from our ability to actually like fulfill that. And so, part of being Aquarius Sun Taurus Moon is like the fulfillment, right? The successor. But the only time that someone could like be a successor in an institution or in an organization has to do when they're actually capable of like, there can't be a gap in like our fulfillment. So like if I'm asking you to like give me a deliverable, if I'm trying to tell you like I can give you this on this deadline and that's what you'll have. The idea and the premise there is that like most of like what was happening late stage age of Pisces was like too much of this aloning frequency, right? Because the eighth house is like taboo and it's hidden, but it's not vapid, it's not false currency. So a lot of times when systems crash, when we see, trends of inflation even in the economy, like those are all things that at the end of the day, really and truly are moving on falsity. So it's like capital being promised or resources being committed that don't exist. And so one of the things that I've been really dealing with is with people is like I tend to attract a lot of people who wear the same mask that my paternal lineage and also like father wore, which is like, the biggest thing is I think, especially it's kind of nuanced. We can talk about like the ways that imposter syndrome can drive a person over like the course of their life. But even deeper than like using the like sticker term like imposter syndrome, like I do come from a lineage of masculines where it's like there was a lower vibration of wanting to be seen as something or wanting to be registered as something that like never really existed or is just like purely aspirational, or again it just aligns with the ego. So a lot of my issues with my paternal lineage that I had to work through this year was specifically that, which was like, one thing my mother really like tried to counterbalance in her divorce was just like, I don't want my kids to be vapid. I want them to really understand that like if you want to be hired for something, it's not just like luck alone or word of mouth alone or grandfathered in alone. Like there, at some point there has to be an embodiment of the deliverable, of like the aspiration in and of itself. So I was dealing with yesterday a lot of deep, it was like every single person that's a part of the same lesson for me and same vibration showed up in the exact same way on the exact same day in the exact same capacity on a day where I was also being challenged to do like something very difficult. Like yesterday I worked at photography double, which is crazy because it's just like our busy season at my studio. But like no photographer should be working like 13 hours straight, like a straight just. It was like it was a lot. It wasn't horrible actually. It was like a fine shift. It's actually like my calling, so it's like I wasn't even in that. It wasn't horrible, but again, it was one of those days where it's like you're not gonna have a lot of extra capacity. So for this to be nuanced, I really like took the time to like piece through like what was being brought to my attention in certain aspects. And so again, all of that to say, it's like for me, that was a huge thing. And maybe me just sharing some insight about like what it feels like to constantly be an Aquarius and have gone through a very long, tumultuous, sort of treacherous cycle of knowing exactly where this stems from and being very clear on that, like, well, for any child, an absentee or an under, because absentee doesn't just mean away in prison. Absentee can mean all of the things. It could be derived from deep negligence. For many of us, we all know that, because again, we're talking about the consciousness in which people have children from. Usually it's just serving the matrix, which means that they don't connect with God before they do it. They're going to have a spiritual experience 1000%, but they're not actually asking God, like, is this the person? Should I be doing that, right? So there's all this fraudulence and all types of spiritual covenants that people are also getting like divine karma and retribution for at this time. So I digress, but that's just like the opening download. This is huge. This is my frequency, right? This is my frequency. This is exactly the same thing. It's like being an Aquarius and also being on stellium, where it's like, I'm trying to derive wisdom because I want to walk my authentic path at the end of the day. But at the same time, I'm really like, there are certain things that just take from my life force. Like there are certain patterns that people that I attract have or display that take from my life force, that I really just at this point, obviously, because I'm also going through the same collapse, it's like, I don't have the capacity to like navigate for you. Like I don't have anything to like help you with at all. Like, sorry, not sorry. And so again, this is, I think for you guys, for us, for this message, it's like literally finding a way to like truly stabilize and like actually heal dynamics and not just like sit around and like, because I think for me, the other thing that was really frustrating me yesterday is like how much of my time I've spent because, again, kind of talking about how like my dad could be any person with any set of like human whatever, right? But because he's my father, right? So because I desire, like, because the way our karmic link is going to be is like I need nutrients or I need something from his blueprint in order to understand my blueprint. The biggest negative from that is like, okay, well, I spent a lot of my childhood trying to understand him in ways that maybe go beyond my own boundaries, right? And so I'm seeing that in my adulthood where it's like I'll subconsciously be attracted to people who have the exact same frequency as this person, my father that is, which is, his best and his shortcomings. And it's like I was living out my mom's pathology yesterday. I was really understanding like what she had to go through in the ways that like she wasn't victimized, but again, like there are parts of like her story with my father that were very predatory. Again, they were 11 years apart, so just like very different places of consciousness. So I always tend to deal with like people, and I wanted to break out of that yesterday where it's like I really want this new cycle to attract to me people who are actually at my consciousness level, because I've gotten the chivalrous, I've gotten people who aren't just like blatantly narcissistic, but at this time too I need to really believe in my capacity to go and meet and match with those who are like really truly meeting in minds with me. So I feel like Aquarius, that's the huge thing for you. Like your emperor is like, yeah, it's got to be a lot of things for you because you run an empire, but I think you're realizing that like being set inside of your empire now means that an Ace of Wands is way more comprehensive, and at the very least an Ace of Wands, an Ace of Cups, an Ace of Pentacles, whatever it is, has to match like the status you actually have in order for it to even feel like that for you, because some of the things you get would be an ace, would be great, could be for someone, but for you, because of the status that you've reached in and of yourself, Aquarius, it's like it's not it's I just feel like it's like you were dealing with that reckoning of like it's not enough. Okay, so let's keep going. See where we're at. Yeah. Oh my God, this is so great. I'm so glad I got to do this. Judgment, Three of Swords, right? That's exactly what it is. It's today I had to make a judgment call. I had to make a judgment call to come back here, to recommit to what I'm doing and to let it go in terms of Six of Cups, right? Because at the end of the day, I really want to, like I said, I really am interested in evolving. I'm really interested in moving out of even what you're seeing me do here. I'm really ready. Like I said, there's so many things that I feel like in the completion of this 14-year cycle, I received back. I overcame a lot of the hard knocks, but truthfully, like the standard, the quality of what I do, my intellect, like they deserve so much more. And I think it actually is just really deeply rooted to like finally, and I felt it in my body. Like I felt like how much like you know, this year, this journey that I had this year, like all the storms that it brought me to were really about helping me see people more accurately. Because again, the Aquarius frequency is like people want to come to you with, because you bring out compassion in people where it doesn't exist, because you represent this like humanitarian compassion and like empathy. So you bring that out of people. But I think for the last 14 years, you've just been getting that part of people, but then you don't, when they're around you, they always attune to the Aquarian thing. So it's like, everybody comes around you, it's like always a good time, it's always an association, it's always the guys, right? But then it's like when it comes to deepening something, or when it comes to like identifying like, is this actually a soulmate, it's like no, because it's like you never really would get anything other than like yourself out of people. So I think this is where like relationships go beyond mirroring. This is where people do individuate. This is where other individuals are just individuals, and there's not really an excuse to make for that. But I'm just so grateful for the clarity that I'm getting right now, and for the release that I'm really going through right now, because I want to really transcend this type of karmic partnership, right? Where it's like all these people really taught me, all 2025 really had to do with like the ways where it's like, and again, some of you could be struggling, I guess, like you could just like not be like not listening when people show you themselves. But I think with Aquarius it's like much more nuanced. It literally is because like you are so 11th house, you have a collective disposition on life, that I just feel like this is like partnerships, a cycle for you where it's like partnerships constantly ending in like hurting your spiritual truth, and you having to make a judgment on it, you know? Because it's like, that was what I was dealing with. It was like, why is it every time that I talk about like my spiritual up to, that's where like, and I used to really personalize that and be really like hurt by that, because I was like, wow, am I just attracting people who are just like the Antichrist, like people who like can't really believe that a black woman can do like any of the things that I'm doing. Like, you know, at the same time, I'm not like, it's not like Gen Z's the first time there's ever been a black woman with a brain, right? Like, we've always existed. It's just whether or not our history's been written or not, you know? And so I was just getting all like, you know, and then I was like, it was just really coloring people very differently. Like, I was just like really not impressed, because at this time, like I said, your loops are on display, everyone's loops are on display, like the things that they do. But again, you know, I was really happy to like call judgment and be happy to like move from like where I already am onto like, and it's an internal thing for you, Aquarius. It doesn't have anything to do, it's just acknowledging that like these relationships, I can at this time in December, it would be so positive for you to just be like, these relationships don't go any further. Oh my god, this could not be any more clear, because this lover is not, it's like, I also think it's about, for you, Aquarius, like learning what something ordained by God would look like and what something doesn't. I think it's like availability, you know. I think too, for many Aquarians, you may have also been birthed of, this is very deep, but it's like your conception likely came from two partners who, there's an issue in like the choice that they made. Again, it may not have been that you came from two like truly divine soulmates, like two people that God designed. It doesn't mean that your parents didn't like make a marriage and have successful, but I think when we're talking about like why Aquarians have this impediment where it's like, what's really, really, really for Aquarius, like what's really, really for me, not just something that could be good for me or good for the community, but like what's actually like restoring my life force. I think it was like always being a derivative from that. I think it's like an original wounding of like the derivative of like your parents getting together, but they weren't really divinely orchestrated, and therefore the seed of pain that's been passed on to you is this like cycle that has to be transcended, that has to do with the fact that it's like it's always meant to break your heart if it's not actually what God had for you. So like one of the things that came through and that you're probably coming through this year was like, as difficult as it really was, it's like anything that really doesn't land is not the thing. And I know that's like Chopper saying judgment. I feel like you're kind of in a serial, because you're trying to figure out who's standing and who's not. You're trying to figure out who gets Aquarius's cup and who doesn't, right? And I think it's coming through this sort of series of like, if the Three of Swords pops up, you call a judgment on it right then and there, right? It's the same thing. Yeah, because it's about, this is you realizing like, this is where the divine daughter with the underfathered daughter doesn't have containment. That's where like these things spill over. This is also intuition. This is also like emotion. That these are cups that like just, they spill over because like the feminine principle, like there's no containment. Do you get what I'm saying? This is always just like becomes third party. And I think in this process you realize, yeah, it's not Two of Cups, because there's no, to me, Three of Swords and Judgment, it's like, it's just not, that's all there is. Like, I think if you either come from people like this or you're participating in something like this where it's like, there's been nothing else to it but like the three swords and judgment. Like, I'm literally just seeing it's like this is what's getting expunged December for Aquarius, because it's like the part of you that was creating from that Five of Cups frequency. And like, again, it's like there's a lot of fives energy. There's a lot of like, we don't, conflict, politics, comparison, all of these things, if that's actually the interior of like your relational dynamic. And because the way that I'm seeing this is like someone's trying to covet this is like, my story, it's like saying that your story was like, oh, it was kismet, it was divine, and but again, this comes back to like the successor frequency. Like, what do you actually embody? Like, again, I'm just saying, like, Aquarius is like, there's something you're navigating in December that it's like, this relationship was truly only 3 swords because it was never this. Other thing is, I'm getting a lot of clarity right now because there are a lot of recovery situations where I feel like you're finally getting clarity on like what belongs on what side of the fence, in terms of like, that is someone that does not have the capacity, or it's not even about capacity. They're just not, it's not aligned to what is aligned. Because I think the other thing is a difference between a person where you have like substance, like a substantive experience to back up like why you think about them the way you do, versus a non-substantive experience. You get what I'm saying? So this is also like building a relationship that's very vapid. These are like relationships like nothing, genuinely nothing like happens. There's genuinely not, to me, it's just like nothing gets done. It's just like, it's a lot. But I feel like I'm even getting clarity now, because some of the ways that I am trying to see how my new cycle, which is much more real than what I spent 2025 dealing with, is an exchange. And many of those people do show up. Like, some of the things that I go for now, I did wait for not just the bite, but the grounded truth of why I'm so intense or so deep. So I was just going through purges, because a lot of these new partnerships, I was just kind of having fears, I guess, that I was projecting subconsciously, that they weren't going to come through for me, or that I have absolutely no one. And even in my new cycle, everyone is just repeating the same subconscious pattern that I really tried to scrub by going to my dad and closing out the things that I did with my entire family this year. Because I was trying to tell my parents, even though they kept like kicking me out over it, I was like, the way y'all exist is exactly the reason why I subconsciously attract people that are like y'all, and I really don't like y'all. Like, no shade, no tea, but it's okay to be like, I don't like your behavior. You don't do anything like for yourself, or you don't show up for yourself in a way that I really find favorable. I don't really like follow the leadership of like the example that my parents' lives are setting up, because they're not really doing anything for themselves right now. It's like definitely their flop era. So, there was a lot of that, but there was also like, but I don't want to be imprisoned by being your child and continually attracting narcissistic individuals that I don't know, because again, that's all vibrational. People who still struggle with the same things that like the people who raised you struggle with, and like you inviting them in the form of a boss, in the form of coworkers, in the form of new friends, like that's such a predatory and like negative experience. And so it's just really, really important. Exactly. And I feel like finally Neptune stationing direct is like all this in your head about things. I think for me, the other thing is like it's happening at the same time. Like, and one of the biggest things I'm also going to say where is like there's very much you calling judgment on something that was like nothing but pain, like because nothing ever happened, like nothing ever existed. It's not real. And then there's like the juxtaposition of like what the realness is. And I think both of those timelines are coalescing for the greater good, because in the end it's all about showing like who the real Queen of Wands is and who really. Because there's some people, like, again, like what I'm just getting the energy of is like this tower, the storm energy. It's like you might be dealing with like the storms throughout December where people just start bullshit. Okay, great. But the thing that really walks away and the thing that God wants to give you clarity on is like the dynamic will always be this. There's one party that has nothing but 3 swords in judgment. So it's probably the person that's starting nothing but fights and judgment. Like if someone just comes out of their neck at you right now during this astrology and wants to talk to you about yourself, they're probably narcissistic. That doesn't make any sense. There's nothing to talk to somebody else about. You're not a judge. You're not a cop. There's nothing to do. Okay. But then also there's this dynamic where it's like it's juxtaposed right now by things that are divinely orchestrated. So like people are squirming at this time because like if there's no divinity to back up what you do, that's why nobody even has to say anything. It's like there's no God in what you do, period. God did not assemble this partnership. God didn't build this life you have. It doesn't matter what you have third dimensionally. God didn't assemble it. Like, and it's very, and that's why these people deal with this impediment. That's why they feel the need to attack you so much, because they can't stand up to that which God has created. And all I'm saying is for the actual Aquarians of the world, God did assemble your life. And that's another reason why you get all these like roaches in your camp, all these people that always want to try to knock you and your success down and what you have, because yours originated from the source. These people are demonic, okay? They're demonic. And when I say demonic, they're just not connected to their source. They're not getting the information, and they're not building a life based on like what God's actually guiding them to do. That's why they look bad. That's why they feel bad every day. That's why, like, if you, that's what I'm saying, Aquarius, is like, the other thing is like, you get up and you have this ability to reset where you're at. You're actually like happy and fulfilled in your own personal life. And people who are genuinely happy and fulfilled, guess what? They're off somewhere being happy and fulfilled. They're not really here to talk too much about nothing, right? And so again, like, for you, you have this brand new beginning that I also think, that was the other thing, is like kind of like the Cancer reading, where it's like there's this filtration needs to happen. Because I think for me right now, I have so much residual heartache that I do understand, but at the same time, it really frustrates me, because again, there are people that I ended up just having to see way too clearly this year, in terms of like the fact that they don't do anything actually like divine for real, like, you know what I mean? And that's hard for me, you know, in certain ways. But I also understand that why the dynamic was always like stabbing me in the heart, stabbing me in the back, being very judgmental to me and what I had going on, was because from the actual higher perspective, the dynamic always looks like this. It always looks like somebody's divinely in a union they're supposed to be, and somebody